What's up? This is the Hoppe and SuperRICH Show. I'm Ryan Hoppe.
And I'm Ryan SuperRICH.
And on the phone line from the Eddie and Jobo Show, which is aired on B96, WLS 890, and K-Hits, Eddie Volkman is on the line. What's up, Eddie?
How you guys doing?
We are doing good. So, where did you grow up as a kid?
Glenview.
What was it like there growing up in Glenview?
Well, it was nice, typical suburban, middle class, whatever. It was different because my dad was the TV weatherman, Harry Volkman, and when I was a kid in the 70s, there was no, cable, so Channel 2 or Channel 9 News that he was on had 27 shares in the ratings. So, my dad was like Simon Cowell to people. He was well known, so we lived in a cul-de-sac on Elm Street. I was the actual nightmare on Elm Street. And people would drive and look at the weatherman's house because, TV news people and personalities were like the big celebrities then, So my childhood was a little odd that way because everybody recognized my dad. But other than that, normal childhood, growing up, with a dog. And we were a little weird. We had ducks and strange pets compared to the rest of the people in the neighborhood. But I had two older brothers and one younger sister, and we were, typical all-American family, I guess. Very musical family.
And what were some of your favorite things about growing up, and maybe some of the things that you did as a kid?
Because we had the house in the cul-de-sac, everybody kind of gathered at our house, and the cul-de-sac was a makeshift baseball diamond, so we'd play baseball or wiffle ball for hours. I mean, from sun up to sundown. We even put lights on the garage to light it up at night, so we'd play with all the neighborhood kids. And there was a huge elm park near us, which has been renamed, but we launched model rockets, but we'd ride our Stingray bikes and and all that. So it was a fun existence.
What were some of the teams that you grew up watching as a kid, and what are some of your favorite memories from those teams?
Well, all of Chicago teams, but because my dad was working for WGN, Channel 9 a lot of those times, I'd go down to the station with him. About every 3 months was Bring Your Kid to Work Day for my dad, and I'd meet Jack Brickhouse or later on Harry Carey, and Ernie Banks from the Cubs did the sports on Sunday nights while he was still playing, which was kind of fun. Right. And so, because of that and my dad's affiliation with Channel 9, we got to go into Cub games. Nice. I grew up, northwest suburbs is typically more your Chicago Cubs area. So, I was a Cubs, and the Bulls weren't great back then, but Bulls, Cubs, and Bears and Blackhawks. But I played baseball in high school and college, so I appreciate baseball in general. So, although Jobo and I snipe at each other, and he takes the White Sox and I take the Cubs on air, I'm more a fan of actual players. I love Abreu and Konerko.
Right.
So,
Did you find it hard to live up to the expectations because your dad was a big personality in the Chicago market and everything?
Yeah, because I played high school sports, and that would be a source of taunting from the other teams. We'd play against New Trier, and they'd I'd come into the basketball game, and they'd go, "Oh, there comes the high pressure defense. I don't know whether he can make a free throw." That was such intelligent, witty jabs, but after a while it became the same thing. The thing nobody knew what to say to my dad when they recognized it. Go, "Harry, how's the weather?" And he was always nice about it, but it's like, we're standing outside, you can't tell, But and there were some people that I was kind of a shy kid, actually, believe it or not. It's funny because I do all the crank calls and everything now, when Jobo and I are on-air stuff, but when we did them as a kid, it was my older brother or my best friend doing them, and I sat in the background just terrified. And they'd say, "Eddie, you do one." I'd be, "No." But some people actually thought, even though I was kind of timid and shy kid, they'd say, you think you're so cool. This was obviously like third grade. You think you're so cool because your dad's on TV. And I'd be like, oh, what? What is that? No, not really. In fact, it's kind of giving me a complex. So,
What is some of the best advice through the years that your dad has given you?
you know, it's funny is that I had two older brothers that never, that got into. One's a computer science guy, kind of an IT guy outside of Philadelphia, and then my next older brother is in food science and menu development. He's like second in command at McDonald's Corporation.
Oh wow!
He basically invented the berry oatmeal and some of the other things on McDonald's menu. My dad never pressured anybody to follow in his footsteps. The best thing my dad always did, and I've always strived to do with my kids, is just be the best at whatever you decide to do, not to pick something for you to do. Now, of course, that meant exposing us to a lot of things. They gave us piano lessons that we hated, and put us in band and sports and things. At least before we were old enough to really, know what we wanted to do, just to expose us to a lot of things. And so you get an idea of what you like, and then once you do, he was there to encourage. Because of his TV schedule, when we had afternoon baseball games, most dads working 9-to-5 jobs couldn't be there, but the famous weatherman was there in the stands cheering on his son at 3 in the afternoon, which is always kind of funny. So he was just he was a great encouragement without becoming a pushy dad by any means. And he was thrilled to death when I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player, but he was thrilled to death when I actually started following, not in his meteorological steps, but in his broadcast.
Right.
And when I first got on B96 in the mid-late 80s, my dad actually did a weather segment. It was before Jobo was even on the show, and so there was a father-son thing there for a while that was something I'll cherish all my life.
Who were some of your radio influences while you were growing up, and maybe any of the shows that you liked to listen to?
I always loved John Landecker,
Yes.
who's still going strong. I don't know how old he is, but he's on. I think he's on WLS FM at night now. He just had a wit and a simplicity of wit that was, it was sharp, but he didn't try too hard. And then there were other people that I really liked that were, folksy without being, there's always been kind of those loudmouth jocks that not the kind of people I like. So my parents always had on WGN, so there was Wally Phillips, who was just Mr. Complete homespun, happy, warm guy. But there was a guy at night on, it was WDHF, and then it became WMET. He called himself Captain Whammo back in the 70s. It was a screaming guy with noises and crazy stuff. But everybody from the Dick Biondies to even Bob Surratt was a mellow morning man on, they called it BBM FM when I was in high school, which later on became, of course, B96. But it was like a light rock station. But he did some very friendly, fun things. So a lot of those people, that I liked funny stuff. So, the loudmouth, overbearing, opinionated radio guys weren't my thing. I liked people that were funny.
What was it like listening to B96 as a kid, and then you end up working there for many years?
Well, I moved away, and I got my radio career started while I was in college. I first went to Illinois, then transferred to Tulsa, and graduated from Tulsa, and then got my first on-air job in Oklahoma, and then went to Austin, Texas for about 4 years, then a short time in San Francisco. And so B96 didn't come into being as a hot hits entity until while I was out of town working on other stations. So I'd come home and hear it, and it just, it was top 40, but I didn't really know anybody there. And I was comparing it to where I was working. And but the weirdest thing was, when I was a kid, WLS AM was the top 40 giant. And to then, after B96, walk in those studios and just say those call letters, even though it was, political, like conservative political talk radio, just to say WLS and stand there behind that logo, that was kind of I was kind of in awe of that. But looking back now at, the B96 years, there were about 5 morning guys on its hit music station format that, before Jobo and I came, and then had a 20-year run. So I don't know if people remember some of those other ones. Dick Biondi was a B96 morning man when he was, 50 years old or so.
Did you have any radio mentors along the way, and maybe some guys that gave you some really good advice?
Yeah, when my young days, when I first got into radio, I was still a senior in college when I got my first full-time gig. I was the screaming night jock on KAKC, and I was always a funny guy. I always had a sense of humor, but you have to know how much to do and how to compress it for radio, because a lot of comedians get on radio and they just blather on. They don't know when to stop. You got to leave them wanting more. You got to be concise enough to not be boring. So one of my the program director in Tulsa, Benjamin Kane, which was just a radio name, told me, he goes, "I bet you think you're better than a lot of the guys on the air already." And he goes, "But you're not." And I was like, who's this idiot? But then, years down the road, I listen to tapes and I go, "Yeah, that was good right there. Why didn't you just stop? Why didn't you just shut up?" So early people like that were good. And then down the road, it's just been bits of wisdom here and there from people that, know what they're talking about. I can't think of any specific examples down the road because now I'm old and arrogant and I think I know it all.
How did you end up meeting Jobo? And did you know right away that you guys would make a great radio team?
I didn't know right away. You never know, but I was hired to be mornings just by myself, and fortunately we had some good people there already. Karen Han was doing news, and a guy named Mike Elston was also doing news, and he was kind of a witty newsman. So they put me in mornings, and Jobo was the night jock. He had already been there for a couple of years. This was around, 87, 88, and the ratings just weren't. They were good, but they weren't great. So they pulled me in. They let Mike Elston go, and they said, "How would you like to work with Jobo?" And I listened to Jobo, and he was a fabulous night jock. He was kind of jivey, a little bit more, Jobo in the nighttime, yeah. Cause he was kind of, and because that radio was that way in the 70s and 80s. So he was kind of coming down from that, and he had told the bosses, he said, "I think I know what Eddie needs," because in a market like Chicago, you had, Steve Dahl and Robert Murphy and Jonathan Brandmeier, and they were like boisterous, loud, in-your-face guys. And I was doing, like I said, my folksy, kind of corny humor, which is fine, but it doesn't grab an audience. So Jobo came in, and we added things like Confession Wednesday and No Panties Thursday and a bunch of things that were grabbed people by the ears and said, "Wow, what's going on here?"
Right.
And within that context, I was still able to be the funny guy, because even when we had interviews with some serious people, and this extended over to WLS, even when we were talking heavy political stuff with Governor Quinn or whoever it might be, to lighten up things. And when you had serious interviews with like Kanye West or Mark Wahlberg, guys that don't laugh a lot, I could still kind of lighten things up when they got, a little tense or touchy. So it was perfect for me because we always say we do what the other can't do. Jobo claims not to be funny, although I find him hilarious in a quirky way. He's not punchline funny, but he just says things, he Harry carries some things. He goes, "It's like a salmon swimming up the wrong tree."
Did you have any favorite memories at B96 or any special days that you guys have had there?
Oh, there were so many. Some
Right.
of the best things were when we were able to do, the people meter things that have appealed to the low attention span of the average American have changed radio so much that people won't sit through a whole thing anymore. We used to do such unbelievable the stunts that people would do to try and win tickets. We would take a cell phone out, and we had 2 guys skinny dip one morning live on the air with a cell phone in Buckingham Fountain to win Bulls playoff tickets. Another guy put bottles all over the floor of his warehouse and ran a riding mower over them. You know, the sound effects and the visual, the imagery that you got was unbelievable, and the fanaticism that people had for the station, the killer bee in those days, was just amazing. So just the way people would do things for the station is my fondest memories. One morning we did a first 50 people that showed up at Daily Plaza with underwear on their head. This was to kick off, I think, the first No Panties Thursday. We were going to give them a $50 bill each. Well, we had a new program director from Hartford, Connecticut, where people weren't excited about radio. So he wanted to run a promo the night before. I said, no. We show up and get on the air and say, okay, we're here. The first 50 people with underwear on their head get $50. He said, no, let's run a promo. There were 5,000 people waiting there. They crushed the B-96 van. The police had to break the whole thing up. There was no way we had $50 for every person. It was like he didn't understand the power of the station at the time. But even the things that go crazy like that are extremely memorable.
What are some of your favorite interviews over the years that you and Joe Bo would do?
I think the ones that just went entirely crazy with some of the funnier comedians, Carlos Mencia was always like to the point where our sides were splitting. But some of the funniest people, some of the best comedians are the ones that don't have to turn it on the whole time.
Yeah,
like Will Ferrell was not very funny in his interview with us, but he was the nicest guy. People say, who was the nicest guy you ever met? And I said, it's got to be Will Ferrell when he did an interview with us. And he was funny, but in a charming, very humble way. And he was like, yeah, I know a lot of people don't like my movies. He goes, my stuff isn't for everybody. But, and there were some that went completely wrong, some people walking in with a bad attitude. A certain former child star had to run to the bathroom to snort a line every 5 minutes. Do we have a commercial coming up? And then I think Linda Ronstadt came in all huffy one day talking about we had way too much compression on our limiters. Shut up. Like, who are you? And Jobo said, well, don't take your coat off. You won't stay. We won't be long. So, but I think the best interviews also were the people that have been there and done that. Like some up-and-coming artists are too guarded or they're too cocky when they're young. But a lot of the people that have like been around a while that have heard every question and either know how to deflect it or are tired of dodging the question and just answer it. For instance, Madonna, coolest interview. Cher, they just, like, go ahead, ask. If I don't want to answer, I won't.
What was it like for you and Jobo to speak in front of like a big crowd, like at like a public event or Summer Bash or anything? You like to describe what that feeling's like, sort of?
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's a rock star feeling, to get up before the economy kind of got bad in 2008, when people could afford to do a lot more stuff. When we'd do those Route 66 concerts where we'd have NSYNC, Ricky Martin, Destiny's Child, including Beyonce. I mean, there's 60,000 people in those stands, and we'd come out, we'd roll onto the stage in a race car, or the first Summer Bash where I skydived in, piggyback on some guy, and Jobo rode in on an elephant. That's pretty cool, but you try not to lose any perspective that you ever think you're one of the stars, the reason that they're there. You know that you're hosting it. And you get a big cheer and you get a lot of love, but it is cool to have that, to have that ability to, even if it's the dumb, everybody scream, who's here from 312, 630, it's kind of fun to wield that power up there. But at the same time, you're grateful that, people are reacting that way. And to be honest, I then, in my downtime, since not being on B96, I've been in a band, and I'm very comfortable now, but to sing in front of a group of like 200 people was infinitely more terrifying than getting up and saying, "Are we in Chicago or what? Yeah, give it up for Ricky Martin." that was easy, or even doing my jokes or impressions. But anything you do over and over again becomes obviously a lot easier. So,
were there ever any songs that you just got so sick of hearing over and over again over the years?
Yeah, well, the when I first was on the hot hits concept was an actual format. It wasn't just top 40, but hot hits was a format that took like 5 A records, and they were in a 35 to 45 minute rotation. And people to this day, when they hear, they say, you play the same songs every 10 minutes. Well, you don't. But especially with 2 top 40s in town, like, or even, now that the mix has gone extremely pop, you'll hear a Bruno Mars on one station, you'll hear it on another, and you'll think that the same station is playing the same song, but it's not true. There's still probably a good hour separation, but on hot hits, it was like 35 to 40 minutes, and when I first got on my first hot hit station, it was called KITS in San Francisco, and around that time, it was Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, and I was like, oh my God, if I ever hear this again. And then it never really happened that much again, especially with the morning show we did, because we were always on to our next bit of entertainment, so we'd hit the record and turn it down. So I'd never have to really kind of sit through the songs. And when I really didn't listen to a lot of radio when I got off, because, some guy that works at Burger King, when it's quitting time, doesn't go, whew, I'm off, I need a Whopper. The last thing you do is you want to go to your own work. So I'd heard enough of the music, but there was a point where every other song was either Rihanna or Chris Brown around 2007, 2008.
Yeah,
that I was like, my God, it's just and the research shows that's what people want, and the people that complain you're playing it too much are overzealous. They listen more than the norm. Because you'll sure enough get a 35-year-old mother that says, I love that new Rihanna song, and you have been playing it for 6 months, because she's just getting around to hearing it. So, you got to find the median listenership, and that's what radio stations strive to do, and the most successful ones, obviously they're doing it right if their numbers are good.
What is your take on where music is going? Because when you guys were on the air, it seemed like songs were more unique and better. And now all the same songs just sound the same. I think that's because rap isn't as prominent. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, when I actually think that music has gotten more melodic, and I know that because I used to do a lot of parody songs, and I kind of got at a loss toward the end of our time at B96 because not only just rap, but a lot of really crunk stuff. Ja Rule and Yin Yang Twins and stuff was just festering all up and down. All like 32 of the top 40 songs were that stuff, and it kind of caused a separation of music. That's when you saw stations like The Mix get a huger suburban audience, and Kiss FM kind of distance itself from B96 by playing more of the pop stuff than B96, and B96 was calling itself Hits and Hip Hop, and that's when they saw some of the bigger declines in ratings. And so, now music has kind of come back around to where it's a little more melodic, but there's always a phase where, there's about 6 female artists that all sound like Katy Perry now, whereas 10 years ago there were about 6 female artists, Hoku and stuff like that sounded like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. There's these producers that get a sound and they kind of ramrod it into every current song because that's what works. Thank God the auto tune has kind of died down. That was in everything. My God.
What was the rivalry like between you guys and Drex?
Well, they seemed to fuel it much more than we did because they were the underdog. Their whole thing was, Eddie and Joe are old. They're old. And did we mention that they are old? And it's funny because I think Drex is like 3 years younger than I am.
Right.
but nobody knew because he was new and he didn't do a lot of appearances or anything, as far as I know. but that was their marketing strategy, but it never really caught on because we saw the research. And they said when we had our beach bash, they said, "Would you let your teenage daughter go on a beach trip with two middle-aged men?" They did all they could to try and beat it up, but that's just that's competition. That you gotta find an angle because no matter what they tried, we were still number one in teens all the way to the end. We just part of it is that A, yes, we were out of the demographic, and B, we were out of the price range because after 2008, the economy just crapped out, and we were due to make our biggest payday yet if they retained us for another year because we had a very shrewdly written contract. But even we knew that it was, fiscally kind of not doable for the station because I don't know exact figures, but the billing for radio advertising has dropped considerably, and it's making a little bit of a comeback. But the heyday of the late '80s and mid '90s is not the same because so much revenue goes into online and digital now.
What is it like when you guys find out that you're not going to be on the air anymore? Like, what is that like after you've been there for so many years?
It's kind of a kick to the gut.
Yeah.
The fact that they were going to pay us $1 million to be off the air for a year, that lightened the blow a bit.
Yeah, right.
but because it's let's put it as delicately as I can. Your microphone is like an extension of your manhood. You feel like you've had something removed. So because you have that connection and you talk to people every day, and it's very. You do feel cut off because psychiatrists will tell anybody that a man kind of, whether it's right or wrong, values his worth based on his profession, whether it's a construction guy or whatever. And when you're not working, you feel worthless to your family and all that. And especially with the radio where you connected every day. I mean, we had a Cume audience of over 2 million. When you can't just tell them good morning or whatever. Fortunately, social media was pretty strong by the end of 2008. Twitter was already up and running, and Facebook already was strong, and there were 7 people left on MySpace. But a lot of people immediately connected with you on there, and you could explain things and all that. But it's kind of a kick to the gut, and even with the K hits, that just never really was working because, we didn't get to do as much personality there. They wanted to play more music in the morning, and but even then, it's sad and shakes you up a bit. But I'm the eternal optimist that there's another outlet somewhere, and we'll pop back up again.
What was it like when you guys added Erica to the show?
That was kind of like my idea.
Yeah.
Because I had met her, and the problem was when Jobo and I got re-signed for the big mega bonus contract, they looked to cut in every other corner, and one of those casualties was Karen Hand, who was with us for all those years of building up to this success. And she was a powerful woman, and she was a good foil, and she took no grief from Jobo and kind of considered herself an equal. And there was some tenseness sometimes, but it was real, and people liked her. We called her the Queen Bee. Well, then they took her away, and then research, because they sacrificed her, I think, kind of financially to pay us our big salary. And then it was me and Jobo, and then our own bosses started saying, you guys sound a little like a boys' club in there, there's no female presence. And I'm going, duh, it wasn't our idea. Well, I had met Erica, and she had done an internship at KISS, and she was very bubbly and had her own ideas, and so I suggested her, and then nothing happened. Then a year later, they said, you guys need more female presence. So suddenly there she was, and they hired her, but then it was somebody else's idea, apparently. And I never felt like some people, she came in immediately and had opinions and stuff, and a lot of people that were used to us thought she shouldn't ever disagree and that she should go along, and that ruffled a few feathers. And she stood by her guns so much that people that worshipped, Jobo's strong opinions got, angry with her for standing up for something. And so it was always a little bit conflict, but I thought it worked out well. And when we did some of the bits, we found her niche on was the To Catch a Freak.
Yes.
Where she would take phone calls from anonymous people that we posted on Craigslist saying, I get really turned on by guys who can rap. So these guys would call the hotline, because that's the number we would list on Craigslist, and go, and she'd answer, and she'd use a fake name. Hey, is this Melissa? Yeah. I hear you get turned on by guys who rap. Yeah. Oh, well, my name is Sam, and that's who I am, and I eat my ham, and I don't like spam. And she'd go, ah. And it was a fabulous bit. But it got a little too racy for the censors, but that was toward the end of our reign there. I thought that was great stuff. And she went out to Colorado, and she's actually on a country station out there, and she's doing well. It's the Wolf or something. And she does halftime stuff out on the court for the Denver Nuggets games. So she's carried on her career really well.
What is your take on the future of radio overall?
Well, soon pretty much every car is going to have internet radio, which is going to deal a blow to satellite. But satellite satellite already, you can get, the Sirius XM app on your phone, so it's kind of like internet radio if it channels that way. So it's going to be tougher for personalities, because every station, and it already is with TuneIn and iHeartRadio and all that, you basically, once it's into cars and other places where people listen, your favorite station or personality, it won't matter where they are, you'll be able to get it. If somebody moves here, how many people, move away from Chicago and say, yeah, I'm in L.A. and the radio sucks here. Well, the guy from L.A. that moves to Chicago says, I'm in Chicago, the radio sucks here, because you're used to your hometown stuff. Well, pretty soon you'll be able to get your station wherever you want, in Australia. And so that doesn't bode well for a lot of up-and-coming personalities, because a few names will be out there, and syndicating those people is cheaper than paying individuals, even paying high school interns to run some things. They can just pipe someone through. So I think you're going to see a little bit of resurgence of personality, because the other thing you can also get anywhere is any song you want. That's why these people that try to do more music in the morning, any song I want to hear, I can find on my smartphone in 30 seconds. The thing I can't get is a funny guy or some riveting content or a good political pundit, that I want to listen to, or a good sports talk kind of thing, or somebody that has something to say. So unique personality content is going to be the only thing that separates stations when you can, in 10 years from now, when you can say the name of a song and it plays in your ear through your biological computer that's, in your body.
And before we let you go, is there any chance that we could hear the Eddie and Jobo show on the air again, maybe on the radio or possibly in a podcast form?
Well, you never know. There's always ongoing talks. Not necessarily a podcast. I think we still want to do some terrestrial radio, and
good.
Something might happen sooner than you think. So we'll see. Yeah, you'll be the first to know, because we're Facebook and Twitter friends, and I'll shoot you a line.
Okay,
possibly very soon.
Where can people find your work online so they can see all your tweets and posts on Facebook?
It's under Eddie Volkman, Volkman, both on Facebook and Twitter. I usually put anything I tweet first, and it goes right to Facebook. Facebook is, I'm maxed out at 5,000 friends, and I think it's 4,000 people following too. But I think Twitter you can have unlimited. So I'm more than happy. I love to talk to people.
Well, have a good weekend, my man, and we'd love to have you on again, Eddie.
Anytime.
Thanks, Eddie.
All right. Enjoy the weather.
Yeah.
We will.
All right.
And that was Eddie Volkman, Ryan, a guy I grew up listening to. You probably saw the giddiness in my voice.
Yes.
The energy. We're going to come back, catch up on breaks. What's coming up in Super Rich News? Anything, any shenanigans? They can call the show real quick, 630-785-2510.
That is the phone number. And coming up, we have a very interesting story. It's very interesting. I'm not quite sure it's a bad thing. Me and Ryan will tell you why, but some high school in California is doing a prom draft.
I think this is a bad thing, but it's a funny bad thing. I don't think this is good at all.
No, I don't mean it's a good thing. I'm just saying
I just think it's funny.
Pretty funny.
I just think it's funny. People are getting mad over this. I'd be mad too if it was my daughter. It's like a first overall pick. We'll let you know what it is. We don't condone it whatsoever.
No.
But we do find it pretty funny.
The Hoppe SuperRICH Show.